Let's get started. Okay, so as I mentioned, today's conversation is going to revolve around creating the UV maps for our blacksmith shop and creating what are going to be called tiling textures. Now, our texture creation pipeline is definitely going to shift today in a big way. We'll get to the application of the textures here in a minute, but the creation of the UVs are wholesale the same. Okay, the process that we go through in creating the UVs is very similar. However, their placement within inside the UV grid is a little bit different. Okay, starting today, we're going to start shifting over into a material-centric workflow. Up until today, and if you look at almost every single project that we focused on over the last 7 weeks or so, it's been a very asset-centric workflow. We create a texture in Photoshop that gets mapped to one asset, right? Well, now with very big objects, we're not going to be able to texture or create all of the textures in Photoshop. For something as big as a building, it's just not going to happen, right? We're going to start working with materials and tiling textures to describe our objects just a little bit differently, and we'll get to that in a minute. Let's begin by start looking at the UV mapping ideas and some strategies behind the scenes that will help you achieve the result that you're after. So I brought my little forge back in today, and there it is. Nothing too different from what we talked about last week. And here are my UVs. Crazy, huh? A lot of UVs. There's a lot of individual pieces on this. Now, we still have to be very careful with how we're choosing to place our UVs inside of our positive UV space. Let's review the process, the sequence once again. I think you're going to find that it's pretty familiar, but let's talk about it, okay? So with a shape like this, where should we begin? Let's pretend, and let's actually do it. Let's just create a new map. Call this Forge Parts New. There we go. So where and how are we going to begin the UV mapping process? Yeah, the flat surfaces first, okay? I'm going to extend this a little bit. Let's do the flat surfaces first, and if we can begin to group objects together by a material type, let's do that, okay? Specifically, let's do all the beams at once, okay? Or all the walls for the first story, or the walls for the second story at the exact same time. That way, when we're starting to, when we're starting to go through this process, our attention and our brain is going to be focused on just one area of the mesh, okay? And we'll be able to consume and understand it a little bit more directly. So here we go. Now, with the tiling texture workflow, we don't necessarily have to worry about everything being connected. We don't have to move and sew things together, so we can blow through them pretty quickly. I like to remind people that even though we like to use project from view, and it's a great way to very quickly get a lot of individual UVs, don't forget about the magic of the unwrap tool on planar surfaces. It's really kind of nice because it allows us to work through a seemingly complex shape quickly. Now, the trade-off here is that we have to make a lot of selections, and we have to really kind of understand what the goal and the target of this is really all about. I know that I want to pop all the corners off, and let's see. Yeah, I also want to have this be one piece in here. Okay, remember, wherever we select with the UV or the unwrap tool is going to represent where the tool is going to slice, and I want this entire section in here to be broken out. I can unwrap this entire model with the unwrap tool in one mighty fail swoop. This is an easy surface to unwrap, but we just got to go in and start making some selections in some directed areas. Okay. Now, selecting the back side of the window and the border, the interior border of this entire room, ensures that that wall, the one that I have selected on the inside, is going to be popped out individually, which is what I want. Let's just do it real fast. Doesn't take long. I like using the unwrap tool because it allows me to very quickly get in, make some selections, and unwrap things quickly, which is what we're after. It takes some practice. You kind of get the vision for it after a bit. I think of it like deconstructing a cereal box. You guys ever done that? Popped all the corners off of a cereal box? we're kind of doing the exact same thing. With time and experience, they'll get really, really good at it. All right, and I think, yep, that's good. Now, let me just double check things. Yep, if we unwrap it together as one piece, pretty good. Now, I've made some mistakes in here, but that's okay. Overwhelmingly, I've created the UVs. These are all the insides of the windows. Looks like they got popped off of their corresponding openings, but that's not a bad thing because we can very easily connect them together. Now, so there's the edge that I want my, let's find the island. Where is it? It's, there we go. Let's just get them closer. Okay. So there's the edge, okay? Now what tool can we use to combine and sew this UV there to its opening, its window opening up over there? How do we sew these together? Do you remember this? Yeah.
It's the move and sew.
That's right. We're in the move and sew area. Melissa, did you have it?
Yeah, your words are a little bit different from my home computer, but I hit select with options.
Okay. So you're going in to move and sew, right? Yeah. And not these, right? This one selected. With options, move and sew. Yeah. That's a great way of working. This button right here, selected, does the exact same thing. It'll move it too. Check it out. Bloop. Yeah. You get some extra options when you go into this area right here. There's some other stuff in there that's pretty interesting to look at. But really, selected, averaged, and unselected are where we want to live. And we can get through this pretty quickly just by selecting the openings of the window and sewing all that stuff together. Now, we have to make some decisions here because we have some overlapping UVs in the corners of our window. We have to make some decisions, okay? Because wherever it's overlapping, what's going to happen on the texture itself? Texture is going to repeat. So in these areas, whatever information is painted in the corner is going to show up on both polygons. You have to ask yourself, what texture is going to go on here? Do I care? Right? If the answer is no, I don't care, and if yes, it's okay if that information goes on both polygons, leave it as is, right? However, if you want to sew them together and create like a miter joint, you can do that. You can do that. It's a little tricky to select as is. But this is why they give us a 3D viewport over here to make the selections in the viewport on this side. So I've just selected, that edge right there, okay? And over here inside of our UV grid, both those edges are selected. Now this is pretty cool. If you just hit the selected button right here, it combines them.
What?
Yeah, it joins them. Now you had to have both of them selected, which is pretty cool, okay? And this is cool because now we can just go in, select these edges, hit selected. Makes it very fast. And if you just keep the pattern going, once you get all the way around, the size of it's going to be pretty uniform. Now at this point, I would probably throw on a checker pattern to see how I'm doing here. Change my action center to selection and begin to scale it down just to see if I need to increase the size of those polygons so that the width of that polygon roughly matches the width of its UV proportionally over inside of our UV grid. Now, strategically, why is it probably a good idea between this surface right here, okay? Why is it important to have this surface and this in here connected in UV space? Yeah, so the pattern continues, but why do we want the pattern to continue in here?
So that you don't have a seam in a very visible spot.
Bingo, and that's the answer right there. So we don't have a seam in a very visible spot. Now, we got some cool things inside of the Moto world to help illustrate where those seams are. if you go over into your viewport properties, yeah, check it out. I'm under the active meshes section of our viewport properties. Check it out. We got an option here that says show UV boundaries. And if we turn that on, we'll get a little purple line that tells us visually where all of our UV seams are. And this is incredibly, incredibly helpful, right? Because now I can just do a simple inspection on the mesh itself and get a real good understanding as to where all my seams are. Now, I want to avoid that, right? This is that other window because I'm definitely going to see that texture seam there. And if I can reduce the visibility of the texture seam, you better believe I'm going to try to do it as much as I can. Okay? Let's go find that part of the model, sew everything together real fast, and we're on our way. And this is one of the reasons I love working with the UV tools in Modo. They're just so fast because I can just make some selections here, move and sew everything together, and then get the corners going by incorporating the 3D view and a selection of those edges in the 3D view. Now, once I have my checker pattern on here, we're going to see pretty directly that there's going to be some distortions in the corner. Whenever we have miters like that, we're going to get distortions, okay? It's a good thing to have, but it's a give and a take. As with everything in UV mapping, you have to ask yourself a question. What's going to go there, and what's better, a distortion or a texture seam? Only you can answer that question, because only you have a vision as to what's going to go in that area, okay? If it's a pretty small feature of your model, maybe the distortion's better, or maybe the texture seems better, depending on what's going there, okay? The cool thing about the tiling texture workflow that we're going to jump into is that we're going to get to see some pretty immediate results as to how all of this stuff is working, okay? And we'll get to that in a second. All right. Now, let's look at my UV map for a second here, because all of these UV islands have some issues that we need to resolve around them, okay? What are some of the issues that we probably should try to fix real fast?
The fact that they're all separated and all those seams are everywhere.
Well, the seams we don't necessarily have. Seams are unavoidable, right? We want to make sure that we're placing seams in areas that naturally make sense, right? We can't have all of these pieces sewn together, right? We just don't have the texture space. So we got to be strategic about it. We got to make some choices. Again, it goes back to that question. What am I going to live with? A distortion or a texture seam? Okay? And you get to pick and choose the answer to that question. Okay? Now, I want to make sure that all of my islands are properly orientated inside of our UV grid, right? Getting our bearings inside the UV islands themselves is really kind of a nice idea. Is there a tool that will get everything kind of, flat and vertical quickly? Before we even hit the Pack UVs button. Not rectangle. Rectangles is good for like tubes and cylindrical shapes. I just want to rotate them all very quickly. Orient pieces. Yeah, absolutely. Check it out. Orient pieces. You click on it. You'll get a popover. I almost never, ever, ever leave the direction set to auto because the computer is going to basically kind of pick which orientation to place all these UV islands at. So I like to tell, I want all of my UV islands to be kind of horizontal. Let's see what we get. Yeah, and it did a pretty good job. It's spun them all around pretty quickly. Now this is just step one. I like to make sure that the local orientation of all these UV islands kind of matches the orientation that we have on the model itself. So these edges should be the top. Yep. So I just do a quick cursory check. Make sure that all the tops of my UV islands represent the tops of my model. Yep. So far, so good. Aha, here's one that I need to flip, right? Because I've selected the top edges here, but they're really the bottom edge of that island. So let's just rotate this at 180 degrees. Dun, 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 dun. There we go. Oops, I may have done it 360. Let's go back. Doop, doop, doop. I'm looking at that wall right there. Is it the floor? You are absolutely right. So in this case, it doesn't matter. That's why I was like, why is this not working? As always, Andy, you're on it. Yeah, so far, so good. I'm pretty pleased. Moto gave me a good result. Okay, great. I'm happy with this. Really happy with this. Let's jump in and start putting that checker pattern on there, because we have to test these things, right? We can't not test them, right? The only way to know beyond any reasonable doubt if these UVs are dialed is to put a checker pattern on them, right? Let's do it real quick. All right. And I want to open up my preset browser, which is the F6 key. Let's go into Images. And down at the bottom here, we have UVs. And I'll just use, which one am I going to use today? Let's use the rainbow one, since that one's seemingly my go-to. Okay. All right. Let's make sure that it's going to the right texture locator. Texture locator, it's going to UV map projection type. The UV map it's choosing is forged new parts, and I'm a happy guy. Okay. Now, what am I looking at in the OpenGL viewport to evaluate the quality of my UVs? Yeah, so we're really looking at the features of the picture itself, right? We're looking at the cubes on the texture. What should those cubes look like? So really the question is, why do we use these checker patterns?
To tell if the texture is being distorted on the UV map.
Yeah, there it is. To see if the UVs are distorting the texture. Since the texture has defined kind of shapes that we know and that we have a solid understanding of, visually it's pretty easy to see how all this is working together. Okay? However, when the features of the picture are pretty big, it's kind of hard to tell how well of a job we're doing. What's another way that we can, what's another way that we can, what's happened here? What did just happen? Why am I not seeing my textures anymore? Oh, I see. Because I accidentally dragged my image above the base shader. My bad. There we go. Okay. So how do we see, I want to make the image smaller on the UVs themselves. So in turn, the checker pattern is going to get smaller as well, which will give me more information, more data points, if you will, on how well of a job I'm doing UV mapping. How can I do that pretty quickly? Here's a great little trick, okay? With the image selected, I'm going to go over into the Properties tab and specifically check out horizontal wrap and vertical wrap, okay? If you look at these two parameters, this is basically determining how many times this image is going to get stamped down inside the positive UV quadrant. It's only doing it once, which is the defaults, okay? But if we turn on, I usually put this up to like something like 3 on both horizontal and vertical. Yeah, and now the texture is repeating more inside the same positive UV quadrant, and what we get is visually the checkers look smaller. Okay? Gives us some good information on how well of a job we're doing. Let's put this to 5. Yeah. There we go. Now I can get a really good, solid understanding if this is all working, and I'm pretty pleased that it is. Okay, great. Let's move on to another part of the model, because we got a lot of work in here left to do. And I want to spend our time talking about some of these beams, because these beams are going to present some issues, some problems with us, okay? And I'm just going to grab, let's just grab some the ones on the front. These in here. Okay, now, cubes like this, UV mapping cubes, pop quiz. How do we do it? How do we UV map a cube quickly? Is there a pattern that we're trying to recognize and find? You should know by now when I ask a question, 9 times out of 10, it's a rhetorical question. Yes, there are patterns. There's always patterns, okay? And for cubic objects like a beam, okay, I'm looking for my C's and U's, as I lovingly say, okay? C's and U's. Let me hide this beam. Oh, actually, we'll just do this one, okay? Looking for C's and U's. You can use the unwrap tool. I want to hide these in here. So there's a C. If you look at the pattern that I've created with my edge selection, it's a C, right? Now, the area that we don't select on that face, that vertical edge on the front, I'm not selecting that one for why? What's the reason? It's going to be connected to if it was selected. A seam, right? That's going to be the leading edge of this beam. I don't want the leading edge, the area of the mesh that I absolutely know my gamer is going to see, to have a texture seam, okay? It's not about hiding, or it's not about eliminating texture seams. It's about hiding them. It's about putting them in places that we know our audience isn't necessarily going to see initially. So there we go. Now I have to repeat that shape on the other side of my cube. So now we're making a backward C. And now I need to connect them. I need to connect these two C's with an edge selection. And again, keep in mind, whatever edge that we select is going to represent a seam, and I'm going to pick that top back corner, right? Because I know in the larger context of things, is my gamer going to see that seam way up there? Nope. So it's a great place to put it. Let's go back, return to my edge selection, and run the unwrap tool. And that's looking pretty good. I'm very, very pleased with that. That's the pattern that we should get. The unwrap tool does a superior job, a very superior job, of ensuring that all of the shapes that we unwrap are in the same textile density to each other, okay? The same quality level, if you will, when it comes to the texture space. So really what you should do, or what you should look to do, is do as many of them as you can at the exact same time. Now in my model, I think I'm going to try to get maybe just all the vertical posts first. If you follow the patterns in here, it's not that bad. I won't do all of them. I'll just do the bottom ones. Then we'll come back and we'll talk about these arches here in a second. Let's hide the rest of the model. Okay, time to start making some C's and U's, right? And it goes pretty quick once you start to understand the patterns that you're creating. I don't want that to be the location of my seam. How about the inside edge? Okay. And this is definitely part of the process when you put your headphones on. You start rocking and rolling. I was doing this last night. Everyone in my household went to bed relatively early last night, and I found myself with about 2 hours of 3D modeling time. Because I'm doing a new paint job on my train model. Have you guys seen my train model? I'm up-resing the textures. Actually, I'm adding texture. The initial series of renders that I did didn't have any textures on them. They were all just basic materials. And I want to go in and make it look real grungy and beat up and just kind of weathered. And so I need to go in and paint it. So I had to spend some time looking at all of my UVs. And, you kind of get in this little trance after a while of UV mapping, and it just goes, or you just go after a bit, right? And I think I spent 2 hours just UV mapping last night, getting everything perfect and dialed. If you're interested to see the end result, come find me during the break. I'd be more than happy to show you. There's a lot going on models like my train. There are a bunch of individual pieces, and I mean a bunch. It may be the most complex thing I've UV mapped. it's pretty crazy. But it all turned out pretty well, and I'm very, very confident the textures are going to look great now. The cool thing about UVs is you only really have to do them once. It's kind of like your general education. Get it done out of the way, and then you'll never have to think about it again. However, if you do a bad job, like if you fail that astronomy class that you hate going to, guess what? You're gonna have to go back to, you're gonna have to go take it again, right? So you can't completely write it off. You want to give it some time. You definitely want to give it some energy. But, you know, if you do it correct, luckily, hopefully, you should only have to do it one time. All right, there we go. That didn't take long at all. And then check this out. Click, one click, and I'm done. Much, much better than doing project from view. And I see you guys doing this over in the lab, and I want to remind you, use the unwrap tool. Yeah, you have to make some more difficult selections, right? But I just unwrapped 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 12 things at the exact same time. That's pretty cool. And I don't have to sit there sewing pieces together, right? The unwrap tool is the secret sauce in the Moto UV system. It's awesome. It's awesome. I think the guys and gals down at the foundry have done a solid job. Okay, so now let's get them all oriented real fast. Whoop. There we go. Okay. All right. I forgot to load something on my computer. Excuse me just for one moment. We'll be right back. Struggle of mine. But one of the things that I like with this new checker pattern, check it out. Here it is. Here's the image. That's cool. Very similar to other checker patterns that we've used before. I don't remember where exactly I got this. I've had this on my machine for years and years and years and years and years, and it's just a great checker pattern. However, what makes this a little bit more different and special is that arrow, or those two arrows in the center there. Those are really helpful, okay? And having these big letters and small letters are also very helpful in determining the direction of all of our UVs are flowing. Because when it comes time to do our wood textures, oops, let's just throw this guy in. Awesome. Let's also increase the horizontal wrap by a bunch. Yeah, now let's see if we can find, now I want to make sure that the letters are flowing in the correct orientation here. It's important for the UV itself, especially for wood grain, that they all be flowing up and down, right? The grain pattern on our tiny texture is not going to be going horizontally on this particular beam. So having these little arrows in here really helps, because now we have a point of reference. In my mind, I'm thinking, okay, the white arrow, that one's pointing the direction the wood grain should be flowing, okay? So I'm going to go around each one of these. Yep, right there. Let's get this one real fast. And we just have to move it up and down. Shouldn't have to move it very far. There it is. Okay, white arrow moving up and down. Let's see on this next one. I think they're all we're pretty dialed. That's going to save me a step later on. They're all oriented the correct orientation. If all of these were like 90 degrees like this, okay, there we go. Now, the dark arrow needs to be up and down. As long as you're consistent, that's all that matters. Have a system. Okay. Pretty good. Let's talk about these arches in here. because this presents a little bit of a challenge for us. How in the world are we going to unwrap a shape that looks like this? Let's talk strategy here. Okay. What are you talking about? Like in here?
That and on the actual arch itself, the edges that connect it to the inner.
Like this one? Or this one?
So on the outside, where it looms, I guess you could say,
Okay.
to basically cut out, to cut the lines that give it joints to turn.
Yep. These?
Yes.
Yep. I like that. Absolutely. On curved shapes, we want to select the edges that, kind of comprise and create the curve. There we go. However, one of the things that I try, almost just as a test, is let's just run unwrap real fast. What would it look like if I just unwrapped it? That's not too bad. Sometimes unwrap does all the work for us. Let's rotate this 90 degrees. And that's actually not too bad. Not too bad at all. Now, the orientation of this is not great, okay? If we zoom in and look at how the checker pattern is looking on these borders in here, yeah, that's very, very good. But I want to make sure I get kind of OCD about this, okay? And the bottoms are not great. We have some work down here at the bottoms. Look at that. That's not so hot, okay? But there's enough in here that I can begin to extrapolate this pretty quickly, right? Here's what you can do. And I'm going to turn off my checker patterns just so we can see the shape a little bit more clearly, right? I'm going to select some C's and U's down in here. Yeah, because I want this polygon to flip and rotate down that way. Okay, very cool. And then, as Andy was pointing out, if you select all of these guys, cool. You got to make the sound effects. It's so much more fun when we get the sound effects. Let's see what the unwrap tool does now. Aha, much, much better. Okay? By popping out these corners, we're able to achieve a result that's a little bit more consistent. Some of those inaccuracies that the unwrap tool was kind of establishing were driven and created by trying to unwrap that bottom polygon and still keep it connected to the rest of the base. Point being, experiment. Just don't go with what the first thing the computer creates for you. See what the unwrap tool does, okay? In my imagination, every time that I'm making these UVs is as if I'm taking a model and ironing it flat, okay? At times, to iron it flat, we're going to have to pop the corners like I did on the top. Other times, we won't have to. Okay, let's do this. Let's orient this vertically. There we go, pretty good. And let's do this. I'm going to try, let's continue to experiment here for a second. I'm going to copy my door. Yes, absolutely. So now I have two. And the reason I've copied my door is that I want to make a point of comparison between what maybe project from view would generate versus what the unwrap tool is going to generate. So let's just do it. Project from view. I've got everything selected. As one might imagine, it's not going to be good. Okay, not good at all, actually. Let's just fit this to our UV space. So they're the same size. Turn on our checker pattern again. There we go. Now, on the surface, if you look at them from the front, they look pretty similar, right? I'd say they're almost identical from the front. But where is the image going to break down? In the corners. This is the project from view one, right? You see how we're getting a lot of texture stretching in there? It looks like the image is being torn apart. Project from view has a very good track record of doing that. However, if you look at the unwrap, it's pretty good. It's pretty good. Is it perfect? No. But it's definitely a whole lot better. There's some small distortions in there, and this is one of those situations where you really have to ask yourself, what's better, a distortion or a seam? Let's find out. Let's see which is better, a distortion or a seam. I think on the second one, the one where I initially used project from view, this guy in here, let's do the exact same thing as we did on this one. However, I'm going to pop all of the seams off and see what we get. Okay, so I'll create something very similar. We want to pop this bottom polygon off. Okay, grab all of these. I'm going to use the up arrow. Go. And then I'm also going to do the same for the interior ones. That's really the result of some of those distortions that we were generating earlier. Okay, awesome. I'm going to hide this one so it doesn't get unwrapped and start working with this one. All right, looking pretty good. Now, did it pop the seams? I think it did. Let's make sure it did. Yeah, it popped the seams of the interior ones, but they're so subtle that there's really no change in form here. It's almost identical. If you really wanted to get rid of all that texture stretching in there, you'll have to unwrap that as like a strip. That's what I'm talking about. Unwrap that, I'll go into a strip. Okay, if we turn on our model now, yeah, now these polygons not going to get any sort of stretching in there at all. But what have we infused? Yeah, okay. This is one of those areas where you have to ask yourself, what am I after? Am I after a distortion or a seam? Personally, I want to get rid of that seam. This is the door to my house. This is something that our gamer is absolutely going to interact with. So I'm okay with the distortion. And I'm projecting in my mind that this is going to be kind of a wood pattern. They're probably not going to notice a small distortion in the wood grain in this area. If they do, these guys and gals have like eagle eyes, and they can spot this stuff from a mile away. It's going to be very subtle. One of the benefits of using this checker pattern is that it's easy. The distortions are kind of amplified to a certain degree, right? 9 times out of 10, though, what shows up on the actual game asset is very subtle. All right, I don't need that one anymore. Thanks for helping me out. Let's just delete that part of the model, and life is good. Now that we understand curves a little bit more directly and how to unwrap them, let's increase the challenge ever so slightly, okay? This is a unique shape. How in the world am I going to unwrap this thing? Before you start thinking about edge selections, consider the strategy, okay? Consider the strategy. How are we going to be unwrapping all of this? What parts of the model are most important for our gamer to see? Okay, so that curve in there. And then probably most prominently, the big flat surfaces in here. Okay? So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab some faces. I'm also going to grab this loop in here. Actually, you know what? It might be easier if I loop select that. There we go. Grab that face. Grab that face. And believe it or not, this is one of the reasons I love the unwrap tool so much. It's just so great. I can just unwrap it. There we go. There's my piece, or the beginning of my piece is here. And now I can start focusing on this surface here. Let's just piecemeal it together. Let's unwrap it. Okay. Let's orient this. You know, this one. Run it around. Okay. Let's look at what we have here. Okay. So here's the front face looking pretty great. Okay. Now, in here, this is where that strip is supposed to go. Is there a way that I can get that in there intelligently?
You could do like the door and pop the seams theoretically.
Yeah, let's try popping the seams and see what we get. I don't know until I try, okay? I don't know until I try. And here's kind of the problem. As is, I want to be able to manipulate each one of these individually. Okay, oops, this is flipped over too. So here's kind of a cool thing. Basically, I want to work with just this one polygon separate from this entire strip. Is there a way I can separate that top polygon from its strip? Yes. Check it out. In the Move tool, we have an option called Tear Off. And it's pretty neat. I'll fire off the Move tool. We have Tear Off. This is neat. That way, let me just grab the polygon, Move tool, Tear Off. And now when I move it, blink, see how it pops off from the rest of its pack? So I can do this pretty quickly by grabbing every other one. With the Move tool and Tear Off enabled, there we go. Now they're all separate. And I can very quickly go in and start to weld these together and just experiment with what the result's going to be. All right, there it is. There's the result, and that's starting to look pretty okay. Pretty okay. Now, if I wanted, I could certainly go in and get rid of all of those texture seams, but you got to ask yourself what's going to be there. If you can live with it, you can live with it. Luckily, joining them together is as simple as selecting both of them and then hitting the Move and Sew selected button here. It doesn't look bad at all. I'm pretty pleased with this. Let's see what it looks like if I do these two. That one kind of goes poorly. I don't like the way that just, we're going to see that pretty easily. So I'm going to leave that as is. Okay, I'm happy with this. This is starting to look pretty good. Yeah, there's really no way for me to connect that side to this strip in here without getting a lot of overlapping geometry. So unfortunately, in here, we're going to have to leave it as is. Yeah, or I guess the other alternative here, because it's all about just experimenting. Let's try this. Let's unwrap this one more time. What would happen? Let's see. Would we be able to? I need to flip this around. Excuse me. There we go. What would happen if I started mirroring or sewing things on like that? I guess we're only going to get the one in there, and we're still going to get a pretty noticeable seam along that run. But at least this part in here, this transition's all dialed in, which is kind of nice. Yeah, all this is nice and cohesive. So it's a pick and choose, right? There's no silver bullet solution for any of this. You have to start projecting yourselves 8 or 9 steps down the line to get a good solid understanding of how all this stuff is going to piece together. Okay? It takes some experimentation, it really does. It requires some love, it needs some work, okay? Okay, and most importantly, just consider what the gamer in the audience is going to see. All right. And I would continue working on this process, until we're done. Check it out. Let's go back to my other UV map. So here's mine. I'm done now. Okay, absolutely done. Let me change my UV checkers texture locator to blast over to Forge Parts. And it looks like I've got most everything dialed in here. I'm not quite done yet. The things are starting to look pretty cool. Looks like a little quilt now, which I like. Okay. So once all the UVs are created, we have some important decisions that we have to make. We have to start considering quality, okay? We don't want one area of our mesh to be of higher quality than the others, okay? And, actually it's an and/or statement, or we can't have the contents of one material group be of higher quality. So if we go back to the wood beams as an example, okay? I want the quality. I'm going to be putting one image map on all the geo that comprises the wood beams. Okay? One texture. That's it. I'm not going to select all of them here, but maybe I'll just get, not the roof, these in here. The ones that are on the front of the house. Okay, I'm going to grab these two. There we go. Let's put it in a material. We'll call this wood beams. All right. So I want all of those, those members to be of the exact same quality, texture quality, okay? I'm going to select things by material. And this is kind of neat because I can go in and grab those, right? And then, did you guys know you can convert selections? I've selected all the objects that are a member of the wood beams material. However, if I zoom in and hold down the Option key, check it out. I can convert to any other component selection type or even item type from that material selection. So I can say, hey, convert my material selection over into a polygon selection. Okay? That way I can maybe hide everything else and begin examining the size of all of our UVs. Because I want all of the members of that UV map, of that material, to have the same textile density, the same texture space quality, if you will, throughout the entire image. Okay? If they're not, one beam is going to get more pixel information than another. So one beam is going to kind of look higher quality than the other. And the grain pattern isn't going to match, right? We want it to be all consistent, all the same. They don't have to be perfectly packed inside the UV quadrant. In the Italian texture workflow, it's material-centric, not UV space-centric. We have to have the UVs to define how the image is going to be placed on the polygons, but they don't necessarily have to be inside that positive UV quadrant, okay? So let's do this. I'm going to grab all of these guys, and now we're going to do a pack. The pack UVs option is pretty great because what it's ultimately going to do here is get all of these parts and pieces into the same textile density. Textile density, in my imagination, is just quality, okay? They have the same pixels per inch, if you will, to each other.
So, are you thinking to make the UVs for each element of the house, if you will? So, in the case of like wood versus cement, different materials get different UVs.
Absolutely. And we're going to talk about this in a second, which speaks to the central role of a material now, right? In previous assignments, it was all about the texture that we created over in Photoshop, right? In about 5 minutes, we're going to be using a picture that we get from CG Textures and flooding that picture on all the polygons that's associated with the material. I think once you see it in action here, you'll go, oh, I get it, I understand. So let's pack this in here. However, look real carefully at the options here. Inside of pack UVs, there's 3 that we need to take a real close examination of. Pack, stretch, and orient. In my imagination, this is move, scale, and rotate. Okay? Now, I don't want the computer to automatically rotate all of my UV islands because I've gone through and made sure that they're all oriented the correct way. It's important that the grain pattern for the wood beams be consistent across the entirety of my mesh. So I don't want it to rotate my UVs. I just want them to move and to scale them into the correct textile density. So I'm going to turn off orient and hit pack. Bloop. There they go. Wonderful. Now I know that they're the correct textile density here when I turn my checker pattern back on. This checker pattern does a really great, solid job of helping us define if it's been mission success for us. Look at the size of each of the checkers on the image themselves. Are the letters kind of the same size? Are the feature of the image kind of the same size? If the answer to your question is yes, as it is here with mine, you're free to move on to the next stage. Okay? Let's rock and roll. I'm a happy camper here. I can almost start to see this wood grain pattern unfold in front of me. Okay. So one of the things that we're going to have to kind of battle, or that we could potentially battle, is organization. Because if I turn on the rest of my mesh, this gets pretty crazy pretty quickly. Okay? I want to show you a trick here in a second that will help us organize our UV space. Because the tiling texture workflow is incredibly powerful, but it does require a little bit more scene management. And you'll see this in a second. Let's start to get some good tiling textures in here from textures.com. That way you can start to directly understand and see what we're building. Visit our favorite little site here, textures.com. Let me log in real fast. All right, here we go. And let's go into the wood section. Now, I think what I'm going to do is go into the rough category. And specifically, I want to look at only the seamless textures. Now, seamless is just a fancy word for tiling, okay? And they're kind of synonymous with each other. They're interchangeable. I only want to see the textures that are seamless. Let's explore what that looks like. Yeah, here we go. And this is kind of a fun one. Or maybe something like this. Let's just check out that one. Okay? Now, what is a seamless texture? Well, luckily, we get a cool little preview. If you click on the preview, it's going to show you what a seamless texture is. It's a much smaller texture that's repeating infinitely, both horizontally and vertically across a plane. Now, what's cool about tiling textures is if they're created correctly, we'll never see the actual seam itself. Do you see anything inside the image that suggests that there's a seam there? Yeah, there's some features of the image that we can see repeating. Yeah, if you look in here, you can see the exact same kind of knot repeating over again. But you don't see any like hard line or any sort of noticeable seam. It is seamless. It's tiling. Okay? These are the ones that we're after. Because we're going to flood my polygons with this image, and we don't want to see any sort of seam in there. We don't want to see the edge of the photograph, if you will. So let's just get it. Let's download this one. You can zoom in and out now. That's kind of cool. Ooh, fun. All right, let's go back to the texture and download it real quickly. While we're here, let's get some textures for some roofing. And let's just do wood. I only want to see the seamless ones. Most of the wood ones are pretty seamless. Here's a good one. We'll grab that one too. And I think that will be, let's get some plaster ones. Plaster. Let's do bare. We're going to use this one. I'm shopping now. I shouldn't shop for textures. But it's just so much fun. This is a good one. Let's use that one. This is going to be an interesting one, and you'll see why. Okay. Now that I have some textures, let's start throwing those into the material groups that we created back over here in Modo. I'm done with my checker pattern. Let's load in an image map for the wood beams. Ah, awesome. Look at that. Cool, huh? And we're getting some pretty decent results. Okay? Very, very pleased so far with how this is coming off. Okay? If you look carefully at the pattern here, and let me turn off the visibility of my texture seams. O inside the keyboard, or inside the viewport to open our viewport properties, and I'll show off my UV borders. Yeah, if you look real carefully here, yeah, we're getting some good stuff in here. The grain pattern is working the way it should be working. Yeah, I'm liking this, okay? Now, if I don't like the pattern, if it's too small, we have some options in here that we can do, okay? There's two things that we can do. We can either change the horizontal and vertical wrap. So if I put this to like 3, now the texture is going to be stamped down 3 times in that same space, right? That's cool. We see a much better we get a much better understanding of how the details of that image are working on the model itself. That's cool, right? That's pretty rad. Or here's the other alternative. I'm I'm going to go in and I'm going to select the contents of that material. We'll convert it over to polygons. Shift H, there we go. The other option that we have here is to physically scale the UVs, okay? So if I increase the size of the UVs, let's just do it 200% here. There we go. Now, check it out. The texture is getting smaller and smaller and smaller inside the exact same area, right? So you have two ways of changing the size of the image on the polygons, by influencing the horizontal and vertical wrap, or by changing the size of the UVs. In the tiling texture workflow, both are just fine. Personally, I would probably change the size of my UVs, okay? When we start messing around with that horizontal and vertical wrap, that's a field, a channel, that doesn't necessarily get sent over into our game engine, which we're going to talk about next week, okay? How to get all this stuff out of Modo and into Unity in a clear, concise, compelling fashion. Changing the size of your UVs holistically is permanent, right? That's always going to be sent to any game engine, to any app. It's pretty neat. Yeah, me likey. It's starting to look pretty good. Let's look at maybe something like these in here. Let's throw that into the same wood beams. Yeah, okay. And this kind of speaks to the power of the tiling texture workflow, right? I already have the texture inside the material group. You can make the association and check out how I'm doing. Now, what's wrong with the what's wrong with my window here? What's not orientated correctly?
The side beams.
Yeah, and specifically, which side beam is wrong? The right one, yeah. Look at the way the grain pattern's showing up on that side beam. It's going the wrong way. It's going this way. Okay? Yeah, I want my, yeah, it really is, right? That's not how these things would be created. I want all of this jazz to be going that way. I want the wood grain going up vertically. So look carefully at your UVs. Luckily for us, the solution is pretty easy. I'm just going to rotate it 90 degrees. And life is good. I can move on to the next one. Grab these two, assign them to that same wood beams material group, and see how I'm doing. Yeah, on that one, it looks like this one's orientated the wrong way. And I'm okay with it overlapping the other UVs. That's fine. Because in the tiling texture workflow, the material is the driver, not the texture map, like it has been in other workflows. Okay? Material-centric workflow. Let's do the roof real fast. Let's go find the geometry for our roof. Let's do this front one. We'll create a new material, call this one a roof, not rough. Okay, awesome. And let's throw in an image in here. All right. So, looking at the texture, looking at the image on the model now. What's my problem?
It's not repeating very well, and I think the UVs are not the same pixel density.
Yeah, we have some big time problems here, right? We have some big time problems. Let's focus in on all these polygons. Check it out. Here are the two objects that have, or here are all the objects that have been tagged with roof. Yeah. Big roofing tiles back over here. Small roofing tiles over there, right? So what do I need to do? How do I fix this instantly? Pack UVs, you got it. Because pack UVs is going to get all of these different discontiguous UV islands in the same textile density. That way the texture shows up at the exact same rate and quality on those polygons. So let's just do it real fast. There we go. So now, if you look at them, they're all the same size, but they're still not correct, right? Yeah. Step one is to get them all in the same size. And then step two is to scale them to the size that we want. And I think that's pretty good. That's roughly kind of the size of the roofing tile that we're after. Let's focus our energy for a second on these in here. Okay? So life is good on this side of my roof, but I go around to that side of my roof, or actually, which side's correct? Hold on a sec. Okay, so the dark bits are on the bottom. No, this side, this one we're good. So that's good. That's good, right? Yep. Underneath, we're going to get a different one from underneath. Let's look at the others. This is the one that's the problem. Yeah, this roof is the problem roof. Excuse me. Because look at the texture. This is the way the texture is supposed to look over here, right? What's wrong?
You have to disconnect that and
Yeah, remember, these are sewn together, right? So the pattern is going to go this way, and then it's going to go down the slope, right? The bottom of the roofing tiles are right here on one side of the roof, okay? And on the other side of the roof, they're at the top. They're up in here, which isn't what we're after. So we need to fix this. The pattern is flipped. Now, this isn't a restart. I think a lot of folks, they start looking at this and they go, oh, man, I got to restart this entire process. No, not necessarily, okay? We do need to start ripping some things apart here and getting what we're after, okay? Luckily for us, the tear off command is really neat. We just pop it off, okay? And I can rotate this 180 degrees. And there we go. Now we're going to infuse a seam up here at the top. So the placement of this image inside of our UV space is going to be important. Because now if I just lower this one, for example, I can create that image right there. I kind of break it down here, so you'll have to pick and choose your battles. Okay? Pick and choose where you want this UV island to be. I think for me, I would probably make sure that the bottom part of the roofing tiles look just absolutely perfect. Yeah, somewhere right around in there. And then I wouldn't worry so much about the top. Because realistically, you're not going to see the top. Okay. Cool. I'm happy with this. Step in the right direction, right? Yeah, oh, these guys in here need some love. These, they're facing the complete wrong direction, right? Or rotate this. There we go. Yeah, same problem though. I have to start splitting some of this stuff off to get what I'm after. Rotate it 180 degrees. Yeah, now the roofing tiles are all facing the same way. I still don't know if I have the size of my roofing tiles just absolutely perfect. I think in here, yeah, I'm still not where I want to be with the size. Let's keep scaling these up some until I get the appropriate illusion. Yeah, that's pretty good. Me likey. It's a step in the right direction. Now, there's some other ideas in here that we probably should look at, okay? Specifically, what about these end caps in here? Should we be seeing the tiles or the roofing tile texture in there? No, right? So we're going to have to go in and customize this, but luckily it's not that bad, right? We could use maybe an existing texture that we have or maybe a separate one. Let's just use a separate one just for giggles today. Let's go back into wood, and we'll do let's do planks. Clean. Let's just see what we get. Yeah, no, that's not what I'm after. How about let's do bare. No. Let's go back and let's do let's see what logs give us. Sometimes no. That's not what I want either. Plywood's a good place to start for sure. Yeah. Let's go back to rough. I think I'm going to use this one. All right. So now I can go in and grab all of these. We'll just do these in here. Oops. I'm not going to do all of them. Although, shoot, I probably could do all of them fast. There's not that many to select. Yeah, let's do these. Grab that one and that one. That one and that one. Create a new material. We'll call this wood beams side, or roof side. This is, I'm sorry, roof sides. Let's throw an image in there. The one that I just downloaded. Is that it? Yep, that's the one. Yeah, so I got some work in here that I got to do. Let's resolve this problem real fast, because these two guys are our biggest issue. Now, I don't want to change. I want to tear them off. And I think I just need to rotate these 90 degrees. Yep. Because my image runs left to right. Yeah, that's what I'm after. Cool. Same with that one. That one looks to be okay. That one's... Rotate that one. Oh, that one I didn't even tag with the material. That's why I was like, what's going on in here? Yeah, that one, let's just throw that one in the correct material, which is wood beam side or roof sides. Yeah, there we go. So you got to look at them. You got to look at them pretty directly and see how you want all this stuff to flow in your mesh. There we go. Yeah. Believe it or not, those small changes have big impacts on how our users understand our models, okay? If you don't change the size of them, the quality level is going to be pretty consistent throughout the entire mesh. Okay, let's do one last one, and then we'll take a break, okay? And it's going to be the plaster sides of my house, okay? Because up in here, I want it to be kind of plaster, so we'll just make a new one. We'll call this plaster. We'll throw in that tiling texture that I downloaded from textures.com. There it is. Now this one's going to be a little bit more fun, okay? Because if you look at what the computer's creating here, now we have a noticeable pattern on the inside of the object itself, okay? If you look at the texture, it's not a completely tiling texture. It only tiles one direction. Does anyone know which direction that this texture tiles?
Horizontally.
Horizontally, right? Because of all that lovely detail down there at the bottom, we're not going to tile vertically. We can take advantage of this, right? Because I want all that cool weathering detail at the bottom of my plaster walls, right? So when it comes time to edit this, let's just focus in. It looks like, let me open up preview. My environment's going crazy right now. That's my fault. Let's see. Image still. Yeah, it's an old project file, and the color correction stuff is washing out the quality of my textures, but that's okay. Let's just do it real fast, okay? Now, I'm going to open up Pandora's box, okay? You have to make sure you turn this off, okay? This absolutely gets filed into the only you can prevent forest fires type thingamajig, okay? You guys are experienced enough now to turn this thing on, and hopefully you're responsible enough to remember to turn it back off when you're done with it, okay? Inside of every viewport, we can turn off the visibility of a selection. Because really what I want to be able to do here is that I want to be able to select this geometry in my UV space and then see and then change its location and then see the impact of that change in my 3D scene. But right now, the selection color of the polygons in my 3D viewport is getting in the way. If I hit the O key and bring open my viewport properties, the visibility tab allows us to turn off the visibility of our selections, okay? Now, those polygons are still selected. They're just not being orange, not being shaded orange anymore. This is going to drive you crazy if you don't know that this has been turned on, right? You see where I'm going with this? Yeah, please do not hurt the feelings of a GCOM 402 student, okay? Because they will sit there for hours going, I'm clicking on this thing, but I can't see my selections, right? And it's like, well, that's because my advanced students turned off the visibility of your selections. So make sure you turn that back on when you're done. Because now I can make meaningful edits to my UVs and see their instant kind of change over here in my viewport. So I'm allowed to move this up and down only ever so slightly. I love that little grungy pattern down there at the bottom. That's quite good. Okay, let's get all of this into the same textile space because this is our textile density. This is not good. There we go. Now that they're all the same, I can increase their size a little bit to get what I'm after. Okay, so there's that wall. Let's move this left and right to get what I'm after. You can even move it up and down a little bit to get the pattern that you're after. There we go. That looks great. Where's that wall? Here's this wall. Move it around a little bit to get the pattern that I'm after. Then up and down. Yeah, awesome. Well, this wall needs to change, right? Because we definitely don't want the seam to be right there in the middle. There we go. Oh, and the back definitely needs to be changed. The inside I'm not going to worry too much about. Aha, awesome. Looking pretty great. Me like you very much, okay? And it doesn't take much energy. Remember our sequence. Get them in the same texture density, right? Textile density, excuse me. Scale them together as a group to increase the how many times that texture is repeating inside that square. And then they make small changes to their location inside of the UV grid to kind of refine the placement of the texture on that polygon. In this workflow, it very much is a what you see is a what you get kind of idea, right? We don't have to send to Photoshop. There's no processing involved. What you see here is what's going to show up in the game engine next week, okay? It's a pretty powerful workflow. I love working with tiling textures. They're a tremendous amount of fun because it allows me to very quickly throw down some textures and get a pretty decent result. Now, what do we lose in this functionality? What are we no longer able to do? Customize it, right? Customize it in a big way. I can't go over into Photoshop and paint like grunge and details and add logos and badges on very specific areas, right? It definitely changes how we customize things. Now, luckily for us, that level of customization is still there, but we've added a couple more hoops into the system now that we have to jump through to get specific information in specific areas, right? Okay? And we'll talk about that in the upcoming weeks. Because the tiling texture workflow, especially when it comes to buildings, is pretty prevalent. Questions, questions, questions? Everyone generally kind of understanding it? It's a different way of approaching the texturing of our objects, right? On big things like buildings and environments, this is a good way to work. This is a great way to work. On smaller objects like a wine barrel, a sword, a shield, a vehicle, things where we absolutely need to put custom texture information, this isn't our jam, okay? We want to use the other workflow that we've been exploring for the last 6-7 weeks to give us those results. All right, other questions? No, everyone's good for the most part? All right, we've been going for almost 2 hours. Let's just take a break, okay? Let's just take a small little break. Okie dokie. All right, so let's just jump back over into D2L real fast. Now that we're all back from our break, and we've enjoyed the horrible Pokemon Go song. Oops. D2L is asking me to sign back in. Just give me a minute. Rock and roll. Okay, so let's jump over. Oops. All right, so our homework this week is to get our blacksmith shop textures dialed and done, okay? I want you to pay real close attention to the finished examples that I provided you below. It should give you a good target and a good expectation for where we're trying to go with this, okay? The cool thing about the tiling texture workflow is that we can keep the quality high, right? Because we're not trying to pack all of our UVs into that positive UV quadrant, right? We're flooding the entire material group or the contents of our material group with a texture that's going to repeat horizontally and vertically, okay? So we can get some really good, stellar, clean results quickly. And I think all three of these do a really great job of illustrating that, okay? All right, so if you have props in your model, okay, they need to be textured as well. Start thinking about how we can include this tiling texture workflow in something like a prop, okay? At the end of this project, we shouldn't have anything, and I mean anything in our scene that is just gray shaded, that's untextured. Everything should be materialed, okay? We're trying to create a self-contained little package of geometry, UVs, and textures that will then flow quite cleanly over into Unity next week, okay? Next week, we're going to spend the entire day talking about Unity, and we're really going to jump into our game engine with both feet next week, okay? And then the rest of the semester, we're going to be sending stuff over into Unity pretty consistently, all right? If we have the models and the UVs and the materials all kind of dialed, this process of getting it over into Unity is quite easy. I forgot to mention this, and I apologize, but over here in Modo, it's really quite important that we only have one UV map, okay? Now, all of my UVs are on one UV map. There they all are, okay? This is cool. This is legit. This is absolutely allowed in every single case, okay? But one UV map, okay? If you have broken parts of your model into separate UV maps, we need to condense them into one. Does anyone know how to do this? How to take UV information from one map and put it in another? Yeah, cut and paste UVs. Over in our UV operators here, we have some great tools that allow us to do this. It's in the Edit UVs section, okay? Cut UVs and copy UVs, okay? Now this paste UVs is kind of interesting. There's also a new one on a transfer. Let's check this out real fast. All right, let's go into my other UV map. And yeah, so I haven't done, let's do this. Let's just throw this, make this into door material group. There we go. Awesome. All right, and let's do this. In our shader tree, in our door, let's just put the checker pattern in that material group just so we have something that tests to see if it's working, okay? Texture locator is currently set to forge new parts, and there we go. So I want to take the UVs from my door and get them into my other UV map, okay? Now there's a couple ways we can do this, and it's pretty neat. The easiest way, really the easiest way, is to select your UVs as I have here. Go Edit UVs, Cut UVs, okay? It's going to save them to your clipboard. And if we go back over here to our other UV map, now we can do Edit UVs, Paste UVs, and this is the thing. We want to make sure that it's set to selection. If connectivity is turned on, we're going to have some problems. Now, what is my big time issue here? Let me get it out of here. And we also, my big time issue is that I need to go and reset my texture locator back to Forge Parts. There it is. Aha. Okay, so that's a great way of making or of transferring UVs from one to another. Now that transfer UV button is new, and let me explore it real fast. Let's do this together. Okay, if we do Edit UVs, Transfer UV Positions, we get nothing. So I'm not sure how that transfer UV position works, okay? I was hoping it would do it would transfer it to a different map. But the cut and paste is going to be where we're at. Actually, I think I know how transfer UV position works. Okay, this is actually cool. Let me see if this example will work. I'm going to grab both doors. Oops. There we go. And I'm going to delete the UVs from that second door. Now, these two shapes are identical, right? We can actually transfer UV information between them, and I think we have to first copy them, and then we go over to the target, which is currently selected, but you wouldn't know it because I've turned off show selections. And then we do edit UVs, transfer UV positions. No, maybe it's the paste. No, I've done something wrong here. Edit UVs, copy UVs. Let's do paste, and now we're going to do connectivity. Yeah. I don't know. I've seen that work in other situations. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong now. So just stick to cut UVs and paste UVs. I think that's probably going to be our jam for the most part if we're trying to kind of reduce everything down into our UV list, because we're only allowed to have one UV map. This is a defined rule, okay, and it's an important one to remember and understand. Going over into Unity, Unity only accepts one UV map per mesh item, okay? One UV map, okay? So we got to condense them. Some folks have multiples, which is fine, but we got to start distilling them down into one using the cut and paste method that I just showed you guys, okay? All right, other questions about what we've talked about today when it comes to tiling textures? Everyone's cool? Everyone's understanding it? Really, I explained it that well, huh? All right. Give myself a pat on the old back. All right. Okay, so we've got about an hour and a half left in class. Let's get to work, okay? I know that you have a tremendous amount of work in front of you. Making these UVs and or finishing your models should be the goal this afternoon, okay? Not too many folks have submitted the final models to the Dropbox. In every sense, you are creating a portfolio piece in this assignment, okay? Let's put some hours and some energy into it so you leave this class with some really good representatives of your talent, okay? Let's get to work. Let's do it.